Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michael Julian. I'm the creator of the Live Active Shooter Survival Training Program and the founder of the Live Workplace Violence Training Program. With us today is Tony Clubb. He is the program manager for the SB 553 solution. That is hopefully going to be the saving grace for a lot of the employers in the state of California that are struggling and stressed about this new law. The new law is incredibly overreaching. I think we all agree on that. And it's written in a way that it leaves a whole lot of question marks and unanswered questions as far as how to implement and so forth. The only thing we know is it's starting July 1st. So everyone's scrambling. And we'd like to think that we've created something great that will help all of you become compliant so that you don't have to stress until next year when you have to do the training all over again. So with that, I'm going to just state that SB 553, as we know, it's making it so that all California employers with 10 or more employees on site have got to do a site inspection. With that information, create a workplace violence prevention plan, then put it into a PowerPoint or any other way you want to teach it, and then train all employees on that plan. It's got to be interactive. You've got to allow feedback. It cannot be recorded as far as we know, because there has to be an opportunity for live feedback and interaction. It also needs to include active shooter training, which we also have covered in our solution. The training has got to be done annually. There's got to be a log of that. So when Cal OSHA comes in and says, are you compliant with SB 553? You can say yes and show your training documents. You've got to be able to effectively investigate threats and actual physical workplace violence. You've got to log it. You've got to have that available as well. And you've got to keep these records for 5 years. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here. We're going to give you a little insight into the law and then share with you our solution that we believe is going to be very, very helpful. With that, I will turn it over to Tony Clubb, the program manager, and he'll dig right in. Tony, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone. Like Mike said, we're going to give you an overview of what SB 553 entails, and we're also going to go through some of the products that we developed to help you become compliant. A little bit about myself. I have had a career in law enforcement over 24 years. And when I retired, I got into private investigations and then met Mike at a conference and became one of his certified active shooter survival program instructors, and I'm also a physical security assessment specialist. So we're working together to develop this program and roll it out to you. So without much more, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through our program intro, which gives you a rundown of what the requirements are, kind of lays out the foundation for SB 553. Let's see here. All right, so for those of you who aren't aware of SB 553, it rolled out in late 2023, and basically what it laid out is that you as a business owner must establish, implement, and maintain a workplace violence prevention plan for each of your sites. So one thing that this legislation did, it became very evident that we can't come up with a plan that we just put as a blanket over everything. We have to make it site specific, and it has to address those hazards and things that an individual may encounter at their personal site. So with that, Mike already addressed a little bit overreaching with this legislation, and the requirements are through the roof when you look at it. When you're going from zero to where they want you to be by July 1st, there is a lot. And that's why we came up with our program, is to help you get over those hurdles with relative ease. In the overreaching, I understand what the state was trying to do. Obviously, you're trying to make a safer work environment. We know that employees they feel physically safe and emotionally safe, psychologically safe, they thrive at workplace and they're much more productive. And then on the flip side, for business owners, we know that when you have these types of workplace violent incidents, they can be very costly. And so right off the bat, let's look at a little bit of some stats. And we know that through records, there's approximately 2 million victims of workplace violence each year. And as a result of that, the impact on businesses is on average between 250 and $330 billion each year. And then the average out-of-court settlement is $500,000. So with some businesses, and probably the vast majority of businesses, one incident could literally put them out of business. And then because of our background, where we come from, we like to share a stat about active shooter preparedness. And over 60% of the businesses polled, they all felt that that was a top threat, yet almost 80% of them didn't feel that they were adequately prepared. And when you ask yourself why, if this is a top threat, but that many people don't feel that they're prepared, well, it's because 60% of them don't have anything in place. They aren't proactive about this subject. So they haven't trained their employees, or they feel that they haven't trained them thoroughly. And that's why we emphasize in our training, we include in our package part of the Alive program, kind of our 20-minute presentation, so that you do address that. And that is addressed in legislation as an effective training that you have to provide to your staff. When you look at legislation, obviously the first thing it's going to do is provide some definitions. So it's workplace violence is now an act of violence or a threat of violence that occurs at the workplace. So this includes a threat or use of physical force against an employee that results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in physical injury, psychological trauma, or stress. And we know that not everybody's built the same. One employee could be in a situation and they may not feel threatened, whereas another employee may feel extremely threatened by this. So it's very individual, and that's what we want to make sure that everybody knows what the parameters are. And of course, this is not going to include acts of self-defense. When we get to what exactly is a threat of violence, this can be, in our electronic age, this can be a variety of things. It can be the standard verbal threat. It can be a conduct on someone's part. It can be
email.
Oh yeah, email. It's right there. Electronic messages, posting on social media. There's a number of things that can be conveyed or can be reasonably perceived to convey the intent to place someone in fear of physical harm. And there's no legitimate purpose for it at the workplace. So it's not just the traditional writing or saying something. Now we have all this media, electronic messages and social media, like Mike said. They've broken it down into 4 types of violence when you have this type of situation. And when we look at type 1, that's committed by somebody who has no legitimate purpose on the business grounds. And we're looking at a criminal act in this type of incident. And that's where someone comes on grounds and on site and commits a crime, and the victim is an employee. This could be if you run a business that sells merchandise. You could have a robbery, a burglary, something along those lines. We see out here in California the grab and runs, where people are grabbing stuff and running out of stores and basically fighting with people to get away. But this could also include, for our work sites, something that happens in the parking lot, whether it's a mugging or a carjacking, someone walking to and from. And then a lot of what we see in California is we have homeless that come onto our grounds when we're not here, and getting them off grounds, or as we arrive to the workplace, there may be an encounter of some sort that results in an incident of workplace violence. So those are type 1. When you get to type 2, that's when it's committed by someone who does have a legitimate reason to be there. They're a client, a patient, a customer, an inmate, a visitor, something along those lines, and they committed against one of our employees. And I think what we all kind of what the norm for us is when we think of workplace violence is type 3, and that's when you have some sort of event that happens between 2 employees. The employee committing the act of violence or threat of violence can be a current employee or a former employee, but they basically come on grounds and they commit this act against one of our current employees. And then lastly, we have type 4, which is when it's committed by someone who has a relationship or a personal relationship with an employee. This could be a family member, a significant other, a friend, someone who has a connection with an employee and then comes on grounds. So those are the types that are outlined in this new legislation. And so when we look at what exactly does SB 553 require, there's a whole litany of things. And this just basically what we've put out here is just some of the highlights. We're looking at needing to have our workplace violence prevention plan, like we talked about in the very beginning. Record keeping, there's record keeping guidelines. We'll go into more depth on each of these topics. We have a violent incident log that we have to maintain. We also, it's not listed here, but you also have to do investigation into incidents. You also have to do safety inspections, and then you have to provide your training. Again, the workplace violence prevention plan, you have to establish it, implement, and maintain it. Then you have to create your record system, how you're going to maintain all your records. You're going to create a system of how you're going to document incidents, and then you're going to develop your training and how you're going to roll it out. That's all part of this that needs to be set up in your plan. So in your plan, we've broken it up into 3 components. And first is the program setup. And the number one thing you have to do is identify who's responsible for the plan. And they recommend somebody that's of a upper management position. They may not have to do all the components, but they want someone at a high level that has oversight over everything involved.
Tony, I think ultimately would that typically be the HR risk manager, someone who's involved with the training and the employees and so forth? Is that who you would recommend, or is it just not clear?
That's who I would recommend. Someone who has some basic knowledge of HR. It may not be possible for some smaller business. There may be one person that's the owner that kind of does it all. So if you have that ability to put it with somebody who's an HR manager, that's ideal. And like I said, they can parcel it off to other people, and they'll have to outline in your workplace violence prevention plan who's responsible for each component. But yes, HR is definitely the place where this responsibility is best placed.
And let me
It may be a combination. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, let me just say, anybody who wants to ask any questions, please just put them in the chat. And we'll either answer them at the time or towards the end or in between when we describe the program and then the solution. But we want to make sure that any questions you have, we can answer for you.
And another person that could be responsible, or they could split. You could kind of have split responsibilities if you had like a safety or security manager on site that's familiar with both HR and safety and security. Also in your plan and your program setup, you need to outline involvement, how you're going to have your employees actively involved. This legislation requires that the employees are involved not only in the workplace violence prevention plan development, but also in providing feedback and modifying, if needed, the training so that it meets everybody's needs. You need to, in the beginning, you're going to talk about how you're going to roll this program out, how you're going to communicate what the plan is all about. We'll go into depth exactly what the training needs to consist of, but you've got to have a plan in place on how employees can get access to this plan and how they can be informed of what's going on and any changes. And then the last one that we talk about is in your setup is promoting. You may have employees that are employed by another agency, but they're on your site. So you have to coordinate with that other employer so that you can get their people trained up on your program, and vice versa. If you have people on someone else's grounds and they're working, you need to coordinate with that employer as well so that they're trained up on the hazards that they may face at their specific site. The next part of it is your actual execution, and your program has to outline, your prevention plan has to outline how you're going to identify and assess any hazards and what you're also going to do to mitigate and improve any hazards that you identify. In your execution, you also have to talk about how you're going to accept and respond to escalations, re-escalations, de-escalations, incidents. What is your procedure for following up on those? And then huge important piece of it is what's your emergency response going to be like? What are the protocols that you have in place? Are your people adequately trained on workplace violence emergencies? What to do, who to call? They need to know where to go. And so we'll talk about that when we get into training a little bit more in depth. And then the final piece of your written plan is program maintenance. And in my previous career, I actually was an HR manager in law enforcement overseeing the HR department. And compliance maintenance is such a huge issue. We identify an issue, we come up with these plans, and then a year or two later, we're dealing with the same issue, and we realize nobody had maintenance, nobody followed up on this, and it kind of fell through the cracks. So we need to make sure we put something in place so that we ensure employees are compliant. We need to have after action response investigations. We need to have debriefings where we talk about it so that we can prevent these things from happening again. We need to have reviews and audits in place and also be looking at our program. It's a living, breathing document. So it's not set that it has to be changed every year. If there's something that happens, it's our responsibility to look at it. Legislation outlines that we need to reevaluate every time there's an incident to make sure that our plan is up to date. And then the final piece of maintenance is training. We have to develop our training. We have to include employee feedback, and we also have to deliver it out to our employees. When you look at record keeping, you've got two different standards. So pretty much everything as far as your plan, your assessments or inspections, your violent incident logs, your investigations, that type of stuff, your corrective measures are all 5 years. Training records are only kept for, or required to be kept for 1 year. We advise everybody, just keep everything, make it simple for yourself, keep everything for 5 years. You don't have to worry about, is this a training document? Is this an investigation document? It's just everything for 5 years. You put it in a folder and at a 5-year mark, you can get rid of it if you feel it's appropriate. The other component of this legislation is the violent incident log, and it requires you to have not only an investigation, but also a log that basically outlines what happened. Here's a list of the things it needs to include: date and time, location, information on who committed. And when we say who, we're not talking about an individual person. We're talking about the type. Like, is it a type 1, type 2, type 3, or type 4? And was it committed against an employee, line level employee, a supervisor, a manager? That's right. Because one of the big things about the violent incident log is that you can't have any personally identifying information in the log. So it needs to be a document someone can pick up and they know exactly what happened. And then part of it is you also have to talk about and address the consequences. Was there a loss of time? Was there anybody that required medical treatment? Was there anybody terminated? Was the plan changed? Was it modified? Did you identify a weakness in your plan and therefore make some changes? So you have to go through all that in the log. And that is something that employees have the right to have a copy of. And per legislation, they can request it and you have to deliver it to them. And that's probably why they don't want any personally identifying information.
Exactly, exactly.
And then also what you'll notice on all the forms, the ones that we've developed and it's required by legislation, they specifically want to know who's filling out the form, who's conducting the investigation, who's filling out the log. So it's really big on identifying specific individuals, not just a position, but an actual individual that's responsible for this. When we get into training, this is a huge piece of the pie because it's great to have the plan, but if nobody knows the plan or what to do in the event that you have one of these incidents, then it's really all for nil. So you must provide initial training when you first develop your plan. After that, you have to provide annual training. In addition to that, in between the initial and the annual, if you identify a hazard that wasn't previously identified and you develop a procedure or protocol, you'll need to provide training on that, kind of like an interim training. You don't have to provide the whole gamut, just that new component that you want addressed and that you want your staff to be aware of. The training must include an opportunity to be interactive. Your employees need to be able to ask questions. They need to be able to get responses, and the person conducting the training needs to understand the plan. It can't just be somebody up there reading a PowerPoint. They have to understand the components of the plan and how it's applied to that specific site. In your training, you need to include your definitions. You need to, it's really emphasized, how do people get a copy of the plan? And how do they participate in developing it and implementing it? They want everybody to be involved, and they want this to be a group thing. They want employees to be included, and they want everybody to have a voice to be heard. Doesn't mean that every time someone makes a suggestion, you have to modify your plan. It means that you have to evaluate it and determine if it's something that has merit and justifies a modification to the plan. You also have to address reporting. How do you report incidents? You need to make sure they know that their retaliation is strictly prohibited by law, and they should be able to report something without the fear of retaliation. And then you have to break down the components. You have to explain to them, what is the investigation about? What do you do? What is a violent incident log? So all the different components, you have to explain when you do your inspections, what's the goal of the inspection and why do you do them? And then you also have to teach them how to prevent and respond to an incident. And the big thing about legislation, it says effective. It always refers to everything as effective. It doesn't give you what a definition of effective is, but it's something that will be determined after the fact. So you have to think about this from your line levels perspective. When you provide that training, is it something that they're going to be able to incorporate into their daily routine, and actually it's going to be effective when the stuff actually happens? All right, so that wraps up our quick and dirty presentation on SB 553. And Mike, did we get any questions in the chat?
Yeah, we got a couple questions before we get into what we came up with as a solution, that from what we've seen from everything out there, the free stuff, the stuff provided by consultants and everything, we're pretty proud of it. I, as an employer of around 300 employees, was thinking to myself when I heard about this law, this is going to take so much time away, and it's going to be so overreaching and really drain our resources. And I was feeling that pain that a lot of employers are. And I'm thinking, how can we just, what do we do? How do we start? So then we came up with the idea of just creating all of the documents in template form, making them fillable on your computer or handwritten, and then making those available inexpensively. So that's what we'll get into in a second. A couple of questions. So you all can help us with the program maintenance. Yes, we'll talk about, Tony will talk about that in a minute. We can help you with anything you don't want to do. Our solution makes it so that you can do everything yourself. However, a lot of people, HR managers or whoever, facility managers that don't have a background in security and safety, might be a little uncomfortable with some of the tasks that need to be done, but it can still be done. We'll get into that in a second. We have an office building that has offices for our employees, as well as solo therapists and their patients. Okay, so an office building with their own employees, and then it looks like they probably lease out or have other offices that don't have anything to do with that business. With a therapist that are not employed with us, fall under our plan. Our interpretation of this is, in whatever building or facility you're in, you are responsible for your employees, but you may also be responsible for, let's say, a temp agency's employees if they are at your office in a full-time capacity. If you have an office building with multiple offices rented out to other businesses, my understanding is that you are responsible for your employees only. However, this would be my recommendation, and what we're going to do, because we're in a similar situation, we are going to offer it to our tenants to allow them to have their employees present when we do the training. It certainly can't hurt. Are we responsible, and can we be fined for not including them? I don't believe so, based on the legislation text. However, certainly not a bad idea. And as we teach in the Alive Active Shooter program, we want everyone working as a team with the same training, so that if something happens, they can respond appropriately together as a team, knowing all of the same ways to respond. All right, with that, Tony, go ahead and get into the solution we've created.
All right. So like Mike said, we created a solution that would pretty much, if someone wanted to pick this up and do the work themselves, they can kind of drop in the information. We'll walk through the plan as well as some of those stuff, but some of the cool things that we included in it. Let me share my screen here. We do give you a copy of the legislation. The thing that I think people are going to really find helpful is we have quick start instructions.
Tony, let me
Yeah.
comment on that if I can, please. We include the entire bill verbatim, and we encourage everyone to read it. Now, it's a lot of pages with a lot of words and a lot of stuff that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it even talks about collective bargaining and temporary restraining orders that have nothing to do with the workplace violence prevention plan per se. However, we do give you the quick start, and we do give you a layman's terms description and breakdown of the law to make it easy to understand. But I do encourage everyone to try and read the bill so that they get why this is so confusing and why this solution will be so helpful to them. Because frankly, unless you're a lawyer or legislator, a lot of this is going to be you'll get lost in the murky weeds. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Tony.
No problem. I couldn't agree with you more. And to help people out a little bit, I know we all have limited time to put towards things. So if you just go to the end of the legislation that talks about 6401.9 of the labor code, that's going to lay out all the requirements that you need to be compliant with in order to have an incident and meet the needs set out by legislation. So one of the things that can be overwhelming, even though we give you all the templates, you might say, well, where do I start? What do I do? Well, to address that, we went ahead and put together a simple little checklist that you go through. And it starts off with purchasing the program, and download the program. It's very simple. And what you're going to be responsible to do, you just go through here and check off the boxes, and you just work your way through the program. And at the very end, when you're all checked off, it tells you, boom, you're done. So it makes it kind of nice. We also included some basically glossary. So you know when we're mentioning something, you know what we're talking about, because trust me, having been going through this legislation for months and months, in the beginning, it sounded like I was learning a whole nother language. Even with my background, some of it took some time to sink in. So we tried to make it easy. You can always go back and see that, what are they talking about when they talk about the workplace violence prevention plan? That's going to be something you're probably going to learn right off the bat. And then we also put in terms that we were using, so you know the package, what it includes, the PowerPoint training template. But the nice thing is you work through this, check the boxes, and it makes it much easier for you to get through this process. Okay, so we've got our quick start instructions, and we've got a copy of the legislation. Let's go into, once you've set up who's going to be responsible for this, what we tell you to do is once you started laying that foundation, the first thing you need to do is a security inspection or audit so that you can develop your plan, because it has to be specific to each site. When you talk about different sites, we've kind of come to the opinion that if the sites are on the same property, so let's say you have a yard where you have trucks, and then you have an admin office. You can probably have one plan because you're going to have people moving back and forth between those two. And so they'll need to know how to respond should they be in one place or the other if an incident happens. Now, if you have a yard that's 3 blocks away and an admin office that's in a completely different address, like I said, 3 blocks away, they're probably going to need 2 specific plans because it's going to have to address the hazards at each place. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't have to train some staff in both because they may float back and forth, but just so you get an idea.
And you may have different security apparatus or systems or whatever at those 2 locations. For instance, one location may have access control into the admin office, so you have to be buzzed in, whereas the yard where the trucks are might only have a gate that closes and they lock at night to keep people out from messing with the vehicles. Those are different security measures, so they will have to be addressed separately in different security inspection audit reports.
Okay, so, and we built a audit inspection form for you. So we tried to make it so that even somebody with limited or possibly even no security background can do it. It is a bit overwhelming because we come from a security approach where we start talking about what's going on in the community, and then we work down to what's happening, how is the property specifically laid out. So we kind of work ourselves in from the out, we work ourselves in, and there's overlap in all these issues. And then once we start moving around the perimeter, we start talking about the parking lot, which presents its own set of issues, and it'll address lighting. You see here, is the lighting adequate to allow clear visual from the parking lot, low light hours? So we talk about walkways. And so this is something that we would walk through on your property. Now we're talking about getting into your building. How about your access points? What's going on with your access points? And then there's certain things within it. When we start talking about the interior of the building, there's certain things specific to SB 553, like the emergency alert system. It says you have to have a way to notify your employees of an emergency situation. It also says you need to have a place where you can have a confidential conversation with somebody should that conversation need to take place. We like to call them crucial conversations, confidential conversations, but if someone needs to be sat in a place where they can have privacy, then you've got to include that. So we walk through your whole property. We get into personnel. We talk about, do you have mental health services available? We talk about, do you have a conflict resolution plan in place or some sort of thing in place? And your employees need to know that this is in place, because I can tell you when we go through and we're starting to do an assessment or inspection on a site, and if I ask an employee, oh yeah, do you have a mental health program? And they tell me no, but the managers all say yes. Well, that's because it hasn't been conveyed all the way down line staff. This is extremely important that line staff know, and that's why you use this to develop your plan. And then if it's applicable, we talk about camera systems and security services. And from there, once you gather this information, then you can take that and start working on your workplace violence prevention plan, which, let's see, that's the bill text. Here's the template. So we built this to match our PowerPoint. So there's going to be certain aspects of the workplace violence prevention plan that you're going to need to drop in your information. And that's because it's specific to your business and your site. You notice in the beginning, it's got a blank for you to put your business name. You've got some logo space here where you can put your own logo in. And then this plan applies to, if you look down at 1.3, all employees at this address. So it's site specific. So you want to make sure that you have that in place. And then, of course, the first thing we do is we talk about oversight. We talk about identifying that person who's responsible, and it outlines what their responsibilities are. And again, we reiterate on what grounds, because this is going to change if you have multiple sites. Maybe the same person overseeing the program in multiple sites, but each site will probably need its own plan if they have different hazards. We go into the definitions and what conduct is prohibited. Same thing we just talked about when we went through the PowerPoint. And then we get into how do we prevent workplace violence? What are some signs of someone that's moving that direction? So we kind of walk you through everything. How do employees report? And this is where it's going to be dependent on what your agency or organization offers. Do you have an anonymous hotline? Do you have online reporting? Is there a certain person or people that they're going to need to contact? And I would say, I would definitely encourage you not to have one point of contact, because when that person's on vacation, they may not go to that person because they're gone, or they may try to contact them. Make sure it's very easy for employees to submit some sort of concern. And then we get into explaining the investigation. How is something going to be investigated? Training and awareness. How are we going to develop the training? In our template, we talk about everything. We talk about when to do it, like the onboarding process. We talk about de-escalation techniques. What are the various components to this legislation? It runs down everything. And then again, talk about training records, keeping everything. And then we go into explaining what is an assessment, audit, inspection, that type of Language is all interchangeable. You've got your inspections. Some people call them inspections. Legislation calls them inspections. They're called assessments. They're called evaluations. It's all under that same umbrella, and it's explained in here what it is. And again, your employees are going to have access to this because they need to. It's required by law that they have access to this document so that they can get it at any point in time and that they have it. We always recommend you give them a hard copy and then have a place where they can go to download it, or, QR code that takes them right to it. Procedures for correcting when you identify a hazard, you have to have a system in place. You're going to be held to that system. When something happens, how are you going to correct it? So as you can see, most of this is written out for you. In a lot of aspects, it's a plug and play. You plug in your information, and there's going to be some certain areas like we talked about with the reporting where you're going to have to tweak it to your organization. But a lot of the heavy lifting is done for you. And then in your plan, you have to discuss that annually you're going to review this plan and make sure that it's adequate to address the hazards that you have on site, and that it is open to modification, and then the process that you go to evaluate your plan. And then again, we include another glossary in this one so that if there's some sort of language that we use, you know exactly what we're talking about. If we use engineering controls, what does that mean? Environmental risk factors. So you can go around here and say, I don't know what they're talking about, and you can see what exactly we're referencing. And that's the plan.
Tony, one thing we missed, can you briefly just cover the businesses that are exempt? So if there's anybody on this thing that doesn't qualify, they know, hey, don't worry, you're okay. Either you're exempt or you don't qualify because you don't have enough employees.
Sure. So when you look at legislation, there's a couple different aspects to it. Obviously, law enforcement, post-law enforcement agencies, healthcare, because they already have a higher standard than general business. But when you get down to conventional businesses, the cutoff is 10 or more employees. And sometimes if you have less than 10 and don't do business with the public does not have access, then you're exempt. But if you have less than 10, but you're still open to the public, then this still applies to you as well. So everybody always just wants to put the 10 or less, or 10 or more line down, but that's only if you don't have interaction with the public. Public doesn't have access to those employees. If you have more than 10 employees, but they all work remotely from a location of their choosing, then this would not apply to you. However, we do have some hybrids where they may have an office building where periodically their staff will come and meet there, and it'll put them over the 10. We encourage you to put something together should something happen on that day. Your staff are trained and they know what to do and how to respond. But that is kind of a hybrid.
There's a couple of comments. Let me just put out there real quick. This is really helpful information. Thank you. The law rollout has been confusing to say the least. Yes, we agree wholeheartly. Purchased this package and went through it with our team yesterday. This really makes it simple to follow and get this plan in place. Thank you. You're very welcome, and thanks for being on the webinar. And we look forward to the feedback, and we're always looking to improve. So if there's anything that we can do to make this more robust, we want to hear from our clients.
All right. So one of the other things, we put together everything that you need to be compliant, but when you look at one of the big ones that they want you to have, it's going to be your workplace violence incident log. So this is the one we talked about with no personally identifying information. So we put this together for you so that it pretty much comes into fill in the blank. You've got your logo spot, you've got your company name, date of incident, time of incident, address, department of incident, if it's applicable, if you have different departments, and then a description of what happened. And then this really gets into, when we talk about who committed this offense, what type are they, who was it committed against, you list the circumstances, incident limited to, employer, were they doing their normal job? Were they on lunch break? Was this something that happened when they arrived to the property? And we break down classifications on where this incident occurred. So you're pretty much checking the box or checking the box for other and putting a description if it doesn't match one of these. And we go through legislation requirements or what legislation outlined as a type of act. So we talk about it in here. And you just pretty much check the box. And then remember that one component that I told you about consequences. that's when we start talking about, was medical treatment provided, and was security involved? Was law enforcement involved? Did people lose time from work? How many hours were lost? And then you get into the end, and what, based on this incident, what actions were taken to protect employees moving forward from a similar incident, if there was anything. Some, if you have something that maybe couldn't be prevented, you have a completely secure place, someone hops the fence, gets in and carjacks someone in the parking lot. That's pretty hard to prevent when somebody really wants to do that. And then again, we talked about this has to be documented, who completed this, how do we get a hold of them, and then a space for additional comments. And that's the violent incident log, and that's the one that your employees have a right to have a copy of.
Tony, touch on the active shooter training that's provided in our solution, please.
Okay. When we provide you the template, the PowerPoint template, we've already incorporated in our 20-minute version of the Alive Active Shooter program. So this is going to train your staff on what to do should they find themselves in an active shooter or even an active assailant. It could be someone with a knife. It could be someone with a baseball bat. It's not just shooter, but it tells them how to respond. And then you curb that to make it specific to your site. If you have safe rooms, if you have massive openings where public can come in, and where would your staff go, so you can kind of modify it so that it meets your needs. You're going to have your action plans, your emergency action plans, and so that, coupled with the training that we provide, give your staff the foundation on how to react should they find themselves in one of these incidents. And it's all incorporated in our PowerPoint already there.
Let me give them oh, no, it's okay. I was going to give them a quick peek, but go ahead, keep going.
Okay, I'm going to jump now. So we did the violent incident log. Let's look at our investigation report, and then we're going to jump to the PowerPoint template. So these two items, there's a lot of crossover in them, but this one is your actual investigation, your post-incident investigation report, and we overbuilt like we did with our whole product. You are definitely going to be in a good position should you have one of these incidents and you use this template. You're going to dot all the I's and cross all the T's and then some with this template. It goes into the type of incident, the perpetrator. We've got places to take statements. Was law enforcement involved? Was medical aid given to anybody? So we've got multiple places, and you can always have additional sheets, but it just breaks down your investigation and what you found. And at the end, you have a place for a summary, and that's where you can also identify, were there contributing factors that led to this situation? And then you have your debriefing, and you have a place where you document who was at your debriefing and kind of your future measures. What are you going to do now that you've identified what does the organization want to do? And then your after action plan, you need to put it down on paper, the steps that you're going to take to make this place safer. And then there's obviously additional notes.
So
now,
everything that is required in this law, and if I think we're making our flyer available, so it's got all of the bullet points that you have to do. We have essentially taken everything that is required, the reports, the logs, everything, created templates, made it so that you can fill them out. You know what to fill out, where to fill it out. You've got it on hand. The PowerPoint, go ahead and pull that up. The PowerPoint is what you're going to, that's the foundation of your training. Like everything else, you're just going to fill in the blanks from what you've learned from the other templates that we've created that asks you questions. You take those answers and then you put them in the PowerPoint, and then you just provide the PowerPoint training to your employees. And it's got to be done annually, which obviously, if you have a lot of turnover, now you're having to do this over and over and over again. Now, one of the things that we believe is going to work is either you do the training, or if you end up having us do the training, you videotape it, and then you have it available to new hires. and you be available for interaction and feedback and questions. But the actual training, as long as it has not changed because something in your workplace has changed, or you've had to update something because there's been some incidences and it needs to be in your plan, you will be fine with this, as long as you offer the opportunity for interaction and feedback and questions of the people that you're training.
All right, so jumping into the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint pretty much mirrors the workplace violence prevention plan. And it has the same concept that there's going to be certain slides that need to have your information specific to your organization slipped in. So just going through this really quick. We have a place here for who are your instructors, what's their bio, if it's us, if it's someone from your organization. And we talk about the primary goals. And this is what you lay out to your employees when you're training them, so that they understand, recognize the strategies, indicators. And like I said, it's everything that we've got covered in your plan, and that's basically what you're training them on. So there's some intro. We talk about collaboration and feedback and plan distribution, how to get the plan, and updates. How are they going to be updated when something happens? We talk about the different components. And then we get into the actual, here's what SB 553 is. Here's the definitions, just like we talked about in our brief. Here's what a threat, here's what constitutes a threat. Here's examples. So we want to make sure that people not only understand that there's new workplace violence, but they may not understand that it's merely a threat or something that's perceived as a threat. So we want to make sure that they're clearly educated on what the law pertains to. Again, the types, we've talked about that. And warning signs, they get trained on what to look for. Some indicators so that they can avoid it. What does a person do prior to an act of violence? These are common things that we're trained up on, especially in law enforcement. How can we predict that something bad might happen, and how can we keep it from happening when we see these indicators? And how to avoid it. If de-escalation, remain calm. We want to teach people that oftentimes they get caught up in the situation. They want to argue with the person. It just escalates. We want them to make sure they check their ego and take a step back, and they know that that's okay. That's what we expect them to do. And then if it's continuing to escalate, what do we do to de-escalate it or prevent ourselves from being a victim? And then we go into reporting. And that's where you're going to enter your information. How do you want your staff to report it? Just like it has to mirror the workplace violence prevention plan. Then we break down the violent incident log and record availability. Break down what are they entitled to? What are they not entitled to?
Stop. Sorry, Alexa wanted to jump in there.
And then we get into a live active shooter response. And this is where we talk about exactly what to do in your site should you find yourself in an active shooter or active assailant situation. And in it gives you directions on how you're going to access the portal so that you can basically put on the video, which is going to be a 20-minute video of Mike presenting it. So everybody gets it from Mike. So you get the developer of the program is going to be delivering it to you. So it doesn't get much better than that. And then they have to be trained up on how to reach out to law enforcement and how to utilize security services if they have them on site. We talk about resources available. And again, this is something that within your company, you have to talk about EAP counseling, whether it's something they do through their medical provider or it's something that you have on site or going through HR so that they know what to do. You've got a space down here that you can put in that information. And then you open it up to questions. So it pretty much wraps everything up into one presentation. There's some stuff that you have to incorporate in, but other than that, and during it, you'll be handing out, we always recommend you hand out a copy of the plan. If it's an in-person training, if you have emergency action plans, specific to your organization, we recommend that you give those out all at the same time. So you give the employee a packet that they have, but they also have to have the ability to access that information should they lose it or their dog eats it like their homework.
Can you stop sharing, Tony?
Sure.
Now, we made this so that for a very, very low price, people can download it and complete it and do the training and be compliant. And when Cal OSHA comes in, they should be immune or in good shape to avoid a smack on the hand or a huge fine. We also realize that there are people, we've sold several of these packages, and then immediately the client came back and said, that's great. I don't know how to do this and I don't know how to do that. I can do this part. Can you do this? Yes, we can do any part of this for you. We can do all of it for you, or we can do nothing but provide you with the templates and you can do it. We also have the Alive program. Several of our clients are like, great, the 20-minute video is fine, but we want something robust. We've been thinking about getting an hour, 2-hour scenario simulations, whatever, active shooter training for some time now. Yes, we can provide that too. That is a separate charge. It'll be a higher fee because it is much more robust. But we can do any part of this that is necessary or required. We've got clients that created their own workplace violence prevention plan, but then asked us to take that information, put it into our PowerPoint template, and then provide the training. So any way that is necessary that you need this, we can accommodate it all over the state of California, because we have instructors up and down the state that they're already providing the Alive active shooter training. And we now have a Spanish speaker, and we are going to be delivering one in Vietnamese very soon. So that's not a problem. So if there's any questions, now we have 2 packages. It's $199 for the templates. We also have I think it's $449 or $449 or $499, where you get, for $200, you get the package. But then for 2 months, you have support from our office. If you have any questions, you can do that one. Or you can do the $200 and then just you have a few questions and we would charge you hourly, our regular consulting fee of $250. So you can do it that way as well. Either way, we want to make sure that everybody is protected from this law. It's a hard one. It's a hard pill to swallow. Luckily, we've been doing this for decades. So we created the solution. We made it easy for people. If they feel confident, have enough background and have been doing this long enough, they can do it all themselves. But if not, we are more than happy to jump in and do it for you if that's what is necessary. I don't have any other questions right now. Can you think of anything we didn't cover, Tone?
I think we pretty much covered everything. Legislation package.
Okay. The company is, my dad started the company in 1967. So we're a private full service workplace investigations, security and protection firm. The parent company is National Business Investigations, Inc. The security company is MPS Security Protection. And then of course the Alive Workplace Violence Program. You can reach us, if you don't already have it, at 833-992-5483. That's 833-99-ALIVE. Or SB553@aliveactiveshooter.com. And we are happy to answer any questions and consult with you in any way we can to get you covered. Either way, we wish you luck. This is not going to be fun. And we're not even probably going to know for a while exactly what Cal OSHA will be fining on. It'll be a lot, but until they start doling out the fines, which are going to be hefty, all we know is what we've given you today. So that list of things we can cover, you can cover, but either way, we wish you good luck, and we hope to work with you at some point. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a good day, bud.